What's up guys, Casual back with a new video, and today we're talking about who the new villain for She-Hulk's operation will be and why it could be someone who was hinted at long before She-Hulk was slated to arrive. So let's jump into it. Now currently in the game we only have a handful of villains, and if you remove villains who can't be fought outside the campaign or operations, then you really only have 6 villains in the game right now, with 2 of them being multiplayer only boss fights, so things are kinda bare on that front. But we know that with each new hero operation comes a new villain, so we do have something to look forward to with the release of She-Hulk's operation this year, because we know we'll get a new story campaign to play through, as well as a new villain that should at some point hopefully become a villain sector that we can replay a few times a week. So when it comes to She-Hulk, she actually has a decent sized rogues gallery, although most of her villains are pretty low tier, but there are a few villains linked to She-Hulk who have loose ties to Marvel's Avengers already. I recently picked up the prequel comics for the game just out of bored curiosity, and while they're definitely lacking in the art and storytelling departments for the most part, they do have some interesting things about them, with one of the biggest being the villains they chose to include in them. In the very first issue, you see the Avengers taking on a group of mid to low level villains, with some of the standouts being Titania and the Absorbent Man. Now for those of you unfamiliar with these two, Titania is one of She-Hulk's oldest villains in the comics, and she got her powers from Dr. Doom, and she has super strength and endurance on the level of heroes like She-Hulk and the Thing. And the Absorbent Man, aka Crusher Creel, has the ability to take on the physical properties of anything he touches, and while he was originally introduced as a Thor villain, he's had run-ins with the Hulk and She-Hulk in the past, and he also had a relationship with Titania at one point. Now the prequel comics and the game seem to follow their own narratives, and the comics are there just to add a bit of depth to the Avengers of the game's universe and to make the world feel a little bigger, but these are both great villains they could introduce to the game through She-Hulk's operation, and I think it would be even better to see them arrive as a duo similar to Claw and Crossbones in the Black Panther's expansion. And so far we don't have much info about who the villain or villains will be for She-Hulk, and Miller has chosen not to say anything about what he knows for the time being, but the game does already have an Easter egg for an older She-Hulk villain that you've probably passed by several times and never even noticed. If you roam the alleys in some of the city environments in Avengers, you can find a movie poster advertising The Rumbler starring James David. And initially I thought this was just an empty nod to the comics, but when I thought about the possible implications, I decided to look into it, and to my surprise, this is still flying pretty low under the radar, and I only found one person talking about it, and the Rumbler is one of those villains who got their powers in a pretty convoluted way, because he basically got the power to create earthquakes by falling into a crater created by an earthquake. It's comics, it makes sense if you don't think about it. But his history with She-Hulk involves him attacking her father, and She-Hulk basically going full savage on him. And with his particular abilities, I think we could have a pretty interesting boss fight that could bring a few new mechanics to the game, because he's not a bruiser or anything, so it wouldn't really make sense for him to be a damage sponge for players to just wail on. But maybe you would have to attack him during certain phases when he's vulnerable, similar to what we saw in the Claw raid. And shout out to High Definition for spotlighting the Rumbler and doing a full dive into his backstory, which I recommend you guys check out if you want to know a bit more about the character. Honestly, I'd be happy with both of these possible scenarios being the outcome we end up getting, because Titania and Absorbent Man as a pair would give us more of what we've been asking for since the War for Wakanda, and if they choose to have the Rumbler as her primary villain, then we should be in store for a pretty interesting boss fight. And the only real downside to any of this is that they'll probably have to be tied to AIM in some way, and I'm honestly tired of AIM as a faction at this point, as I know a lot of you are, but I just don't see us moving beyond the AIM storyline until maybe after the Kree invasion. But nonetheless, I am hyped to see what villain or villains we could see show up for She-Hulk's operation. Let me know down below if you guys think it will be any of the villains I listed here, or do you think we'll possibly see a bigger villain like the Leader arrive? Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to catch more Marvel's Avengers content every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.